T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Launch Sequence podcast. I've got you for the next hour to an hour and a half to talk about the most controversial thing ever, the Jesus tech, server meshing. I brought in a local expert, not a CIG employee, but somebody who knows a little bit more about this than I do to talk more about what's going on with server meshing since it launched in Star Citizen 4.0. Where is dynamic server meshing and kind of what's the plan? What's the current talk? Thank you for joining me today, Grolo. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Space Tomato.
Yeah. Last time we talked, I think it was like January, maybe, right after 4.0 and server meshing came out. How things been for you since then?
Great. Still going on YouTube. Didn't expect to be, but back when we talked in right after 4.0 launched, the channel was still very new. Still trying to figure things out, but here I am. We're still going. Channel's still growing. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's good to see. You've been kind of covering, it seems like, MMOs and the back end nature of them, kind of.
Yeah, I really focused on just MMOs and kind of the technical side of them.
Any particular standout videos or like topics that think people really latched onto?
Yeah, just recently, I did a reaction video to the announcement or unveiling of Spacetime DB 1.0, which is a kind of a new back-end technology that Clockwork Labs was building for like indie MMO developers, which is an interesting scene. Like indie and MMO don't really seem to go together to me, so I was kind of intrigued. And so somebody suggested, hey, you should take a look at this. So I did, and yeah, that video has been very well received. And then Tyler, the person who did the video, reached out to me and said, hey, maybe we should chat. And so I did like my first podcast style thing. So that was cool.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good angle too, because it's, man, this stuff, we can all talk at length about what CIG has said about this stuff or what any game company does, but it really helps to have some personal knowledge on this. I mean, I'm like, yeah, replication layer this, quantum system that, cool, PES, sure. But when it comes down to it, I can't tell somebody what's going on with server meshing right now, or if it's doing well or not, because there are glitches in the system and all that kind of stuff. Let's start with just kind of talking about what's been going on with Star Citizen in general this year. How have you been feeling about just the all-encompassing direction the game has taken in 25?
It's a good question. I think it makes sense. So I guess the purist in me would have loved to see them kind of defer this pivot until later. I think there's still so much fundamental technology that needs to be developed for this game to really shine. But the I guess the side of me that can empathize with business and the realities of being a business understands the pivot. I think we talked about this before, but like Squadron 42 is supposed to be coming out sometime in 2026. So it makes sense to me that they want Star Citizen to be in a much better spot than it has been, so that whenever that game comes out, maybe they can capture some more eyeballs for the MMO. And so, yeah, this pivot to stability and content makes some sense.
Makes some sense, but is it fun for you? Are you enjoying it?
More than I thought I would. I was definitely a skeptic. Because I'm not. I even did the video a while back, and I was saying like whenever they were announcing the like new Mine and Align event, they were throwing around the term sandbox content. I was like, doesn't feel like sandbox content to me when you have like this choreographed thing that you got to go through to do a thing, and like I don't know, that just doesn't scream sandbox to me. So I was very skeptical, and I was like, but I went in and we started messing around with it, and I was actually surprised at how much fun I had doing that event. How about you? Have you done it?
I haven't gone through the whole thing, no. But the way I've been playing it, I think probably leads me to actually I'm working on a video for this right now, emphasize how much I feel like it is a sandbox sort of activity because of like I've been there so many times and I've never done the actual event,
Yeah.
and the potential for locations like this to exist and you kind of just stumble upon it and like maybe somebody has triggered something so you're like what's going on over there, but you don't have to go. Like that sort of relationship with the environment in this game is what I've really wanted, and it feels like specifically with a game where you're going to different planets they have a lot of opportunities for that. So I'm happy to see this kind of thing come in. That being said, I certainly see some design problems with it. It definitely doesn't feel like it's scaled up for the size of the game at the moment. But that's also sort of emphasized by the fact that there's just not anything else to do. It's like the same problem they have with these global events. When they run it, everybody thinks it's the main thing. But in reality, when Star Citizen's actually being played, the Hathor locations are going to be just as significant as some asteroid bases over in Stanton, significant as some sewers in Area 18 and some caves over on Magda. So it's like, because we're lacking content across the board, it makes this content drop come in feel a lot different than I think it's supposed to, and play differently.
Yeah, I completely agree. And your point on the sandbox element was kind of echoed through my comments, and my mind has been changed on it. I've come around to think like, yeah, there's a good bit of sandbox elements to this. So
I hope that they can tune it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit difficult to understand what's going on when you arrive, and I'm not sure how they can make that more clear. But it's hard to know. Okay, all the dishes are aligned. Does the laser need to be launched, or does somebody need to go up to the station to get the codes? Like, where is it? And I don't know. Maybe that's something that's just inherent in MMOs. I haven't played any before.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I think. I mean, the challenge is good. Yeah, I don't know. It's always a balance. But
Yeah.
I definitely see where you're coming from because we struggle with that. We go in there with a large group, and even we're like, wait, which way's north? We don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
It takes us really
Yeah.
time to get our bearings, and so I can see like a smaller group or like individual, like being very
Kind of
challenging.
wonder how players will take that. Will they consider that part of the gameplay or a waste of time in getting to the gameplay that you have to understand the situation you're stepping into?
Yeah.
Besides this, with 4.1 that being dropped, anything else this year that's really stuck out to you? I know you made a video about item recovery. I didn't get to see what you had to say about that.
Yeah, not a big fan. Again, this is something that like whenever I heard about it, I was very skeptical and concerned. But I think maybe all of us have like this idea of what like Star Citizen is in our mind, and then we go into the game, and it's not. I don't know. It's kind of out of sync at times, and so I think that's where I'm at. Like, as soon as I heard about it, I started thinking about, well, like, what if we're on the surface of a planet and we're doing like bunker missions or maybe like the underground facilities or something like that, and we have a Nursa parked outside, and really we just kind of go in and throw ourselves at this and die repeatedly and just respawn with all of our stuff, and we just keep going back, and like it takes away like the risk or the, you know what I mean? Like that's what I was concerned about. But so far, now, I haven't played a ton since item recovery went in, but so far it just really hasn't mattered. Like I'm still enjoying the game despite it, I guess.
It hasn't really made much of a difference to you?
Yeah. How about you?
I've noticed it maybe once. I think that was in PTU.
Yeah.
I understand people's frustration with it, especially certain situations. It makes it harder to do what you're doing as a profession.
Yeah.
But I think there are a lot of easy ways out of those problems for CIG. And as long as they're giving us stuff that like people want to carry around, I don't see a problem. Everybody's going to want to have a backpack. Everybody's going to want to put stuff in their backpack. I know I'm for sure carrying weapons around in my backpack ever since they increased the size. So you can't pick up stuff on their body. That's kind of a bummer, but you can still get the rest of the stuff from the backpack, and I think that's at least something.
And it's temporary. It's a temporary problem, right? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like
Yes.
tier 1 will be able to pick stuff off the bodies again, which yeah, that is a little immersion breaking at the moment. But again, given the state of the game, I mean, I wasn't looting bodies anyway. I didn't have enough space for all that stuff.
I
So,
think that temporary bit is also what concerns people is nobody knows how long it will be tier 0. And with CIG, I
Yeah.
mean, we've had some long tier 0 applications of stuff.
That's why I was skeptical and concerned to start too. I actually don't know. Do we have any tier 1 systems?
They don't call them tier 1. Mining is well past tier 1 though. Like we had mining tier 0 with 2018.
Okay.
And then they added ground mining, and then they redid the HUD, and then they added new materials, and then they added subcomponents and gadgets and new materials and FPS mining. So it's like it's well past whatever they would call tier 0. That's the thing though. It's like they're not good at doing, okay, this is tier 0, and then 2 years later being like, okay, this is tier 1. They're just like, this is tier 0, and then the rest is just added on. So you don't know where they really are.
To that point, then, so you've been here a lot longer than I have. So, but to that point, like, is item recovery the first time they've clearly like outlined what is tier 0, what is tier 1, what is tier 2?
Yes, I think so.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's different now, and everybody's going to talk about, oh, I thought we weren't getting tier 0s, this and that, and there's so many caveats with that. That was regarding the actor feature team, regarding Squadron 42 work, all that jazz, but it is a different time and the company's different. And I think them laying out the different tiers kind of shows that they have a different idea of how this is going to develop compared to something like ship docking, which we got tier 0, and then you never saw anything else.
Yeah.
Speaking of tier 0,
yeah,
server meshing. I've heard that the server meshing we have right now is not real. It's not actually working because there are glitches. Can you tell me definitively, are we playing in a server meshed game right now?
Who said that? But yeah, yes, definitively, we are playing in a server meshed environment. Like, you can verify this just by, I'm sure most people here are probably familiar with the console commands. I mean, you can bring up the server status in the upper left or right, wherever it is, and you can track yourself as you're moving between these planets and stations. You can see whenever your server is flipping. So that's one thing. And I've been on Microtech trying to get a ship out of my hangar, and you get the big screen says server error, please wait. But somebody else in my part is another part in the system, and they're like, everything working fine over here. So that alone should tell you like there's multiple servers involved, and we are crossing between them to some limited amount of success. Yes, there's definitely bugs. There's definitely bugs.
Right. I'm interested in, I mean, just bear with me.
Yeah.
Is there a certain level at which there are not enough bugs that it is like legitimate, or that there are too many bugs that it's not an actual achievement? Or is it just, in your mind, are we good to go and we're just moving forward now?
I think it's definitely an achievement. The game is in a totally different state as a result of it. I mean, I see these comments all the time, like people saying, like, I would not want to go back to pre 4.0.
Oh,
You
no.
know, there's a lot of things that I think it's easy to forget, like the progress we've made, because you just kind of get used to the new normal, and it's like now we're focused on the new problems. But like if you go back to like pre 4.0, remember 30Ks? I mean, the only reason I really remember them anymore is because I have a T-shirt that has like 30K on it. But like
Yeah.
that's
Go ahead. I think people in the future are going to be, they're going to laugh when we're like, yeah, there used to be this time where we'd play this game and just randomly, almost the entire server would just get kicked out. And you didn't have any, you wouldn't spawn in where you were. You might lose all of your cargo, all of your progress. They're going to be like, why in the world were you guys playing that? That's insane. The crash recovery has been nice. It's like not the best situation, but I do really appreciate that you don't get kicked out of the game constantly anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely got a ways to go, but I've appreciated it. Just how well it works, actually. Like the other day, I was I was pulling into a hangar, like I was halfway into the hangar with my ship, and I got that pop up says, "Hey, there's a server error," and I'm like, "Oh my
Oh
gosh, like this
gosh.
is going to be horrible. I'm going to come back. The doors are going to be closed on me. I'm going to be exploding or something crazy like that." But it finally recovered. The doors were still open. My ship was in the same position, and I finished landing. So from that point of view, like I feel like it's working exceptionally well. But of course, like getting this pop up and say server error, please wait. I mean, that's not a
Does that hurt?
situation we want to be in either.
Yeah. They
Um,
also, I also like that client crashes oftentimes put you right back where you were now.
yeah, yeah. I don't even
That's
know when
been
that
pretty
changed.
nice.
That's just kind of started happening.
And so
Um,
that combined with um, the item recovery, allowing people to get back into the game much faster, those three changes have made the game a lot easier, I think, for people. I want to say casual. I don't think anybody who plays Star Citizen right now can be considered casual. You guys are all running through the ringer, but I think it's like a really big help to somebody who's jumping in freshly to not have to deal with all these possible time sinks that aren't going to be that big of a deal when the game is further developed.
yeah, I think that's a really good
But
point. There's people that I would bring in now that I would have never tried to bring in previously. To your point, like imagine telling somebody, okay, you gotta come here, you gotta gear up, you gotta do this, and then you get to the station and 30K. Okay, we gotta do all that
yeah,
over again.
you might lose everything. Sorry.
Yeah,
And then even if the servers don't kill you, you might fall down and die, and then you're gonna lose all your stuff anyways.
yeah,
And there's no way to get it back. Like at least in the future, we can be like, well, you lose all your stuff, but just do an insurance claim and you can get it back. Now it's like, no, fly all the way back out to that moon and get your stuff. And I want to be clear to everybody because I know people are listening to this and they're like, yeah, that's terrible. I like that. I just think at the current state, the game doesn't really help people out with that.
yeah. I think the changes have
So
been made sense for the current state of the game for sure.
yeah, I do too. So server meshing overall, then, how has that been performing in your opinion this first quarter?
Um, That's a good question. I think like about as well as can be expected. Um, are you talking about the like the emphasis on stability, like that pivot, and how that relates to
N-
server meshing? Or
no, I'm not necessarily their whole thing, just the launch of server meshing itself. Obviously, it struggled in 4.0, but do you feel like it's made progress? Is it performing kind of what you expected with that initial launch?
gotcha. Yeah, I keep forgetting like it's relatively new. Like I guess what November, December is when we started playing with server meshing. So
Yeah, we were testing it a little bit before that, so it
yeah,
feels older.
um, I think some of the changes they've made, like between patches, has given me at least more confidence that the tech is working well. Things like like whenever they first rolled it out, I think we were like in a 3.3 configuration, and then each patch kind of like changes the configuration a little bit, which tells us like there is some flexibility there, and it's not all that hard to adjust this stuff. And like whenever they make the changes, like they've been smooth. It hasn't been like we've started encountering like a ton more uh, uh, like bad results from like these changes, right? Because like in the most recent patch, they went to I think like a 3.7, like 7 in Stanton, 3 in Pyro. Before that, it was like
Yeah.
4.4, and like so they're like ramping up player counts slowly. They're adjusting based on the events and stuff like that, and that's all has been working pretty well as far as I can tell.
Do you think, I'm sure a lot of that has to do with just finding the most efficient layouts and stuff, but do you think that they are, I mean, just like extrapolating on that, do you think there's a potential that like they might have to, if they're doing just this in a situation where we have a couple events going on a couple of moons, could we end up in a situation where they need to have 15 servers running just to have Stanton play all across well?
I think so, absolutely. And it's also like slightly concerning that they now have this escape hatch because we've known for quite some time that the real holy grail is dynamic server meshing, and like once we have that, um, it'll be much we'll have a lot more like agency in what we can do as players, like just kind of like grassroots events and stuff like that. Like I think somebody mentioned Daymar, like that's a really good example of like something that players are trying to do, but the system does not automatically like reconfigure itself to handle. But so the fact that they have the ability to like change the grid with static meshing, like I've been in the industry long enough that I can imagine like pointy hair bosses in there saying like, well, the dynamic meshing is not quite as important because we can just push static
Just keep adding
meshing to do what
servers.
we need. Like just keep adding servers, right? Like they're not that much. But yeah, I could definitely see us
That's
like
expensive.
before dynamic server land or dynamic meshing lands. I can definitely see us seeing pretty large static grids.
But that's why we've always been operating under the assumption that static server meshing is very expensive, and they don't want to spend much time running a game in this environment.
You would think.
For a company that's really trying to make the money go the furthest it can, I imagine it's just not. But that's the weird position they're in. We know they wanted to get to dynamic meshing because
Mhm.
this was going to be expensive, but now they also really need to keep people playing the game. So it's like, and
Look
we'll
at
talk about this later. Where is dynamic meshing? But
Yeah, I mean, you can look at dynamic meshing as being like a major cost savings, but you can look at static meshing, at least in the current state of the game, as almost being like an income generator. Because if they're able to do more content, more interesting content, more engagement, like you would imagine, that's going to drive more player retention, more sales.
yeah,
So,
huh? Interesting. The server meshing conundrum.
yeah.
Because you're absolutely right. Static server meshing gives them the ability to basically sweep all the other problems that have been plaguing the game, not under the rug, actually, just fix them.
Yeah.
Because now they've got that environment and they don't have to push. And we haven't really heard anything all year, right? Since they released server meshing into 4.0, it's been a quarter and we haven't heard anything.
Yeah. Some of that I would expect. I know, like if you think about like whenever they announced the pivot to the new emphasis on stability and playability and all that, like they announced that like what, November, December.
Yeah,
And then
December.
of course you had the holiday break. And we all know that January is kind of like their planning month. That's where a lot of like minds are focused on, okay, what are we doing this year? So I've always kind of like written off January in my mind. So really, we're looking at like February and March is what we've had development wise. Probably some of January, but like we haven't had a ton. Like you said, it's been a quarter, probably a little less.
Mhm.
And I would imagine that a lot of that has been like focused on, okay, well, what does this mandate from the chairman mean for our teams and for like the way we're doing work? And so I would imagine a lot of power is going into that.
So you think the progress probably slowed down a bit on meshing in Q1, especially with the focus on just making sure what they had already was running well?
That would be my guess. And I'm sure that like this push for content is also a bit of a drag short term. I'm sure that like the goal is that this content can be delivered without like involvement from the underlying system and architecture teams, but I'm sure that's not quite the case yet. I'm sure there's a lot of like things that like the content creators or mission designers are trying to do, and I would be surprised if they were not running into like issues that they have to escalate and be like, oh, this thing's not working, I need fixed, and then some system person has to come along and fix it for them.
It's
So
really hard to imagine just how much little problems can like cause a whole snowball of issues in a project like this.
yep, yeah, they add up quick.
Um, what was I gonna say about meshing? Dang it, now I forgot. Well, uh, speaking of content, actually, I mean, we could see even with some of the content drops, like the mining updates, they put the golem and the geo in, and that's content focused. But even the geo required them to do probably some kind of work for the jump jets. So you're right. Even if they're focusing on content, playability, and stability fixes, there's still small things being worked on here and there that are getting put into the game. I'm sure we'll see more of that throughout the next quarter.
Yeah, definitely. And that jump jet is really fun. Have you played with it?
Oh gosh, dude, it's so much fun. Yeah, me and Red Monster went out mining last week, and the best part of the session was we would just park the Caterpillar like 250 meters above the mining deposit, and we'd all just stand by for Titanfall, and we'd all drop out the side of the Caterpillar together onto the mining rocks. It was so cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's insane how much the smallest things can make a very novel experience. But I guess that's why we're playing Star Citizen.
Yeah, I experienced it whenever I went to load up. I was loading up a that one drop ship with a couple geos for something we were gonna do, and I was on a moon, and you spawn the geo like on that little landing pad on the moon. And
Yeah.
at first, I started walking off the landing pad to take this thing over the ship. I'm like, wait, why am I doing that? And I just turned around, I aimed at the ship, and hit the jump button, and boom, I was on board. It was great.
Why so old-fashioned
I know.
walking and stuff?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know everybody is just sweating waiting for the combat version of this thing to come out.
That'll be fun.
I'm personally very excited for the salvage one. I hope, like they showed it in some concept art a long time ago, I hope they give it EVA, because there's really not much salvage gameplay on the ground. I think we would need to be able to move it around in space for it to be really useful.
Yeah, I agree. That would be cool to have an EVA version.
Oh
I would
gosh.
also it would
Oh
also
my
be
gosh,
cool to
that'd
have
be
more.
sick.
It would be, but it would also be cool to have more ground salvage. I can imagine like wreckages and stuff on the ground. Like we already kind of have those missions where
Yeah.
you kind of go to those crash sites. I could imagine them adding more stuff like that, salvage oriented. That'd be cool too.
Yeah, you're right about that. There's a lot of derelict content they've talked about in the past that they haven't really capitalized on lately. And I think that was excuse me. I think that was initially because of server meshing. They just didn't want to put more POIs in and derelict ships everywhere. But now that we've got that, I wonder if we're going to start to see them dropped in more.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, I mean they just recently brought some of the missions that they had to push the pause button on back because of server meshing. I know we just
Yeah.
finally got the 890 jump mission back here recently, which is cool. So
Yeah, I
obviously
think
they're making progress on getting more things compatible with it.
that's definitely been one of the harder parts of the server meshing drop, though. I think in general, both the mission and transit system refactors are the most disappointing part about 4.0 because, I mean, we've been waiting for the transit refactor arguably as long as server meshing. That's been a problem since Levski was in the game, and it really sucks to have seen it on the roadmap and then saw 4.0 come by and then not see it get put into the game. And then even now, they're developing a separate team to handle current problems while another team does the refactor, which kind of goes to show just how far away the refactor still is. And I'm like, guys, we were talking about refactor on 2021 monthly reports. It's just, that's been a real disappointment for me.
I share that level of disappointment because it felt like October. It felt like it was right around the corner, and now here we are. Like we're forming a team. Like I don't know.
And that's a big one.
Yeah.
Transit is so freaking big. It's like, that's like if your inventory just didn't work, which, we've experienced.
Yeah, it's huge. I'm hoping that that brings we've talked about stability and stuff, and I'm hoping that it's just like a huge step forward. But
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that in general. So the push this year has been for playability, which they have laid out to be stability, performance, and content. We've talked about content. I think everybody has been focusing a lot on the content that's been coming in. But how do you think they've been doing when it comes to stability and performance? And what do you take those two words to mean differently from each other?
I think it's a good question. I mean, they're intertwined to some extent. Stability can certainly, or performance can certainly impact stability, and vice versa. But I've seen it seems to me like sorry, I'm trying to get my bearings here, but I think
No,
like
it's fine.
we're going to see a bit of a roller coaster on the performance side. Definitely. Like we're still early in this game. We're nowhere near the optimization phases, right? Which they've been. We've seen how long that phase has been dragging on in Squadron 42.
I can't believe that.
And so like we're going to continue to be on this roller coaster. But I think with meshing in place, with even with static meshing in place, like we're not going to like see it as severe as we might otherwise see it. Like I think we'll see like how many players an individual game server can handle. We'll see that fluctuate, but since we're all spread out a bunch among us servers, like it won't really be in our face so much, right? Like maybe historically like a game server handled 100 players with ease, but like as performance degradations seep in and like whatever, like maybe it goes down to 40. We don't even notice it because we're not putting 40 people on a server because we're working across 10 servers, and then it'll go back up, and like maybe on this patch a game server can handle 120. So I think we'll continue to see that, and I think with like these new events like a mine and a line and stuff like that, I'm sure that like how much a single server can handle might be less than it was the prior patch, but we just don't even know. Stability wise, I think I don't know. I'm still running into all the same stuff I've ever run into. I'm still falling through planets and out of my ships. And
would you say that player FPS and the physics between spaceships impacting each other, would you put both of those under the stability label?
Yes, and I think both stability and performance, because like some of the jank and like just crazy physics stuff we see, I think is because of the complete reliance of Star Citizen on like server authority. I think we've talked about that the last time I was on, but like where the game server is authoritative on everything that's happening in the game, and they're not really deferring any of that to the client, right? And so like everything we do has to go to the server, and the server has to say, this is the result. But whenever the server starts lagging behind because of the overall performance, then you get this disconnect, right? And you get like this jank and crazy things like, oh, you were in your pilot seat and now you're in space. Stuff like that, I think, is the result of the server just not being able to keep up with everything that's going on.
And do you think the server not keeping up, you're saying that is a problem you saw before server meshing, it's a problem you see after server meshing? Is it something that maybe would be fixed by something else then? Server meshing is not really going to have an effect on that kind of thing?
Yeah, that would be what I would say. Like I think they're kind of two separate issues. The only reason they're related at all is because server meshing reduces the amount that an individual game server has to do. But anytime an individual game server has too much going on, and this is more of a problem in static meshing than it will be in dynamic, we're going to run into these kinds of problems until the game servers are stabilized enough and optimized enough that these kinds of things aren't happening anymore.
So that's my big question is what is enough? Because we were just talking about like maybe they want to start pushing 10 servers so that they don't have to deal with that kind of a problem. And I'm wondering, like, are you guys going to optimize servers so that this doesn't happen, or are you just going to keep loading more servers in? But I guess we're just circling around to the same question again.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of just optimization work, and I think last time we talked a little bit about this, where like it's a kind of a chicken and egg problem, because like yes, you can spend time optimizing now and improve the player experience, but like it comes back to that IKEA example I gave, where you buy a piece of furniture and you don't want to tighten one screw and then tighten the other. You kind of do them all at the same time. And so like as this game's evolving and they're adding more features into the game server, like if they spend a bunch of time today optimizing it so that our experience is amazing, like, and then they add more stuff, well, then they're just going to have to go back and repeat that work. And I think that's why we haven't seen them do that yet.
Interesting. Would you say that the stability, I think you've already kind of hinted at this today, you say that stability and performance is better than it was last year?
I think stability. Stability,
Sorry,
just because.
Better question.
Yeah, go ahead.
well, better question is something you had mentioned earlier. Are they sticking with what they said about playability and stability and whatnot?
Yeah, I think so. I think, but it's steering a ship this big is like changing direction is a slow process, and I think just the inertia alone is going to take time to overcome. And like I said, we've probably only seen 2.5 months of this new focus, and a lot of that time is just going to be spent on getting the teams like all aligned and working differently than they were before. And so, like, I don't expect us to really see the results of this until like Q3, Q4.
I was thinking summer is when it would really start showing up. I was having a field day when people were like, I mean, you can see the signs, you can see what they're doing, but I was having a freaking, it was hilarious when it was like February 3rd and they had dropped their first patch of the year and people were like, what happened to the stability focus? And I'm like, dude, what? It's been like 2 weeks since they got back to work.
Yeah.
And they're not really doing much yet.
Yeah.
But even now, I think a lot of people would say that the game is running better now than it was post 4.0 and definitely than it was last year. But boy, oh boy, there are some things that really piss me off, man. The quantum travel system is getting on my nerves lately. Holy crap.
Dude, I know. I don't know what problems you're facing, but I mean, we keep running out of fuel and just quantum dropping and being ejected during quantums, all kinds of stuff going on.
The most annoying thing is when I'm in orbit around a planet and I want to go to some place on or around the planet, and they're like, "No, jump to the planet first." Like, I'm here. I don't need to jump 200 kilometers just so you can make it so I can jump somewhere else. It's just such an archaic system, and we've seen what we're getting next, so it's even harder to use it.
Oh, really? I probably haven't seen that yet.
They showed it off at CitizenCon 2023. And they've kind of shown it a little bit here and there with the quantum boost, but I think quantum boost is going to make getting around planets way easier than it is right now.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Definitely, I cannot wait for that. For sure.
All right.
Except it'll be interesting to see what challenges come along with it.
Yeah, there's going to be more bugs. New bugs. Yay. Let's talk about the future. Dynamic server meshing we've been talking about here and there. Can you give a little bit of a explainer for the people who don't know what dynamic server meshing is?
Yeah. Dynamic server meshing takes static meshing and let me put it this way. Dynamic server meshing is the ability to add compute to anywhere in the universe based on player density. That's really what it is. So like the more players you have in an area, the more CPUs you have servicing the players in that area. That's really what dynamic meshing is all about. Whereas static, we're just kind of pre-configuring based on CIG's guesses. Like they roll out a new event, and that new event takes place on Daymar. They're like, hey, I bet we're going to have more players on Daymar. And so they pre-configure the mesh to add a bunch of CPUs to Daymar in anticipation of all the players jumping on this new event. Dynamic is just the next level where players get to decide where they want to go, and the universe adapts to that. So like if we want to have a race on Clio instead of Daymar, we can go do that, and the game will just automatically reinforce Clio by adding a bunch of CPUs to Clio.
I like that idea of it's like concentrating compute, basically just like a heat map for where resources need to go for the game to run well.
Exactly.
Now, static server meshing is a thing that games have done.
Yep.
Dynamic server meshing hasn't been done in video games as far as I'm aware. Is that correct?
Not in a distributed manner like this, as far as I'm aware. I am aware of some very old MMOs, and this was actually brought to my attention on one of my earlier videos because there's people out there that know more than me, and somebody called out, like, I think it was Asheron's Call, which did this in a limited capacity, but it was like on a single server. So nothing like what CIG's chasing. I mean, I keep saying, but we're watching innovation like in motion here.
It's really exciting to get to see the ins and outs of a company actively going through R&D and production on something it's not super consequential. Like if this doesn't work, it's not like the world ends. No country goes into famine. Like we didn't lose 20 years of technological advancement or something. It's just a video game. It's
Yeah.
the stakes. The stakes are obviously high in some regards, but it's just a good time. I just think it's really freaking cool to get to follow something like this, especially when they're doing weird things with gaming.
I couldn't agree more. I think the stakes might be higher than what we're even aware of. I think you could say the same thing about like AI. Like, if AI doesn't succeed, like, yeah, nobody's going to starve, but like, it stands to have a pretty big impact on the world, and I think gaming does too. And the other thing I'll say is to your point about like watching this all like happen, like this isn't something that, yeah, we definitely don't get to observe this kind of thing very often. And I also think that
Nope.
like what CIG is doing, like almost every software company I've ever worked for would love to have CIG's aptitude at doing this. Like everybody wants iterative development and iterative delivery and constantly pushing out what you have and like getting that feedback from your customer and your clients and all that stuff in real time. Like so many software shops want to do that and very few can actually execute it. So that alone is props to CIG for that.
It's just a lot of different things have to come together for that model
Yeah.
to work, huh?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Ton.
crazy that Star Citizen has lasted this long.
Yeah. Well, I
know that
mean,
you read these recent articles, and like one of the titles of one of them was like they can't keep they I kid you not, the article title started out
Wired?
with something like they can't keep doing this. No, it was PC Gamer. I'm
PC
like,
Gamer,
bro,
that was it, yeah.
what do you mean they can't? Don't let them develop the game anymore. What does this mean, man? It's so dramatic.
Man. I saw that. I'm like, really? I don't even. I'm sure it
But
got a
yeah,
lot of clicks.
I think I clicked. I probably helped with the advertising too, and I posted it to everybody else. But like, I think one of the interesting parts about the articles that'll come out about Star Citizen when it hits these milestones is one of the best is like IGN had a article come out, and the article was basically just Star Citizen's still a thing. Wow. And then it went into kind of what was going on, what the new patch was, how long it's been around, how much money it's made. But it was like a super neutral, normal article, just informing people about the game. But then the lead editor at the company, took it and posted it with a tweet that was so much more inflammatory. It was like, somebody needs to convince me how this isn't a Ponzi scheme or something like that. And I'm like these are the journalists themselves posting stories written by somebody else at their company and then adding a narrative to it. And that's what happens all the time. People see these articles, they see the headlines, they don't click the article, they don't read it, and they don't realize that the people who are writing the articles and actually doing the research are interested and are saying interesting things. And that, I think that's probably, we're going to have some kind of a weird moment where it all flips on its head and people are like, wait a second, they have been making a game and Squadron 42 is getting marketed to come out. Oh. And I'm sure plenty of people won't care. They won't accept it. They'll continue to turn away. But I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh, wait, they're actually going somewhere with this. It's not Beyond Good and Evil 2 again.
Yeah.
Sorry
Yeah.
for bringing that one up, guys.
I just learned about that game recently. I was at one point I was like researching how long games take. One of my arguments along these lines of like debunking some of this conversation around Star Citizen and how long it's been taking, and people like scream like 12 years, like that's just an unreasonable amount of time. But when you go through like how long games are taking to develop now, and you compare the scope of Star Citizen with some of these other games, it begins to look like, wow, I'm actually surprised they've accomplished what they have in such an amount of time. Because yeah, look at Good and Evil 2, right? Like, yeah.
Well, if you have some nuance, it's really easy to poke holes in Star Citizen's development. I mean, there are plenty of places where you can be like, oh, that's a mistake. Oh, they shouldn't have done that. But all these people would just come in and be like, 10 years and 800 million and they haven't released the game? And you're like, well, technically, that's what Rockstar's done with GTA 6. And then they're like, well, that's different. And you're like, exactly. Nuance. What do you know? But no, it's just if it's taken this many years, then it's out of bounds.
Yep, exactly. Um,
But we've gotten off track. I wanna circle back around to actually I want to finish the talk on dynamic server meshing. Actually, I didn't really get to ask you.
Yeah.
Where do you think it is? What do you think's going on with that sort of development after Benoit, I think last year mentioned that there was a lot of work gone into it already.
What I hope they are working on, I don't really know. I wish I could peek behind the curtain, or I wish I could ask somebody over there. But what I imagine they're working on right now is like priority number one is splitting the hybrid. Um, I actually don't know if they plan, like, if they plan on even doing like an implementation of dynamic server meshing on the hybrid or not. But like, we all know that one of their plans is breaking apart the hybrid into like the replicant, the game server, Atlas. Like, all these are like various components that comprise dynamic server meshing, all currently embedded in one process. And I think that's part of some of the performance and stability issues we see today. So once that's all cleanly separated, I think you have a better foundation for delivering dynamic server meshing. So I would imagine that breaking apart the hybrid is like priority number one, and that there's also another team back there planning and thinking about, okay, once the hybrid's broken apart properly, how do we deliver this thing?
Can you go into a little more detail about what you mean by the hybrid?
Yeah, so if you look at some of the diagrams on what dynamic server meshing involves, you have things like your game servers, your DGSs, whatever you want to call those. Those are the things that are actually running physics calculations, and they take ownership of entities in the universe, right? Like a game server will own running calculations on you as a player, in addition to like all of your gear and maybe the ground vehicle you're in, or whatever. Like, that's all owned by the game server. There's a replication layer that sits below that is responsible for persisting everything that is going on with your player, right? Like, it knows that you as a player are wearing a backpack, and in that backpack are these items, and yada, yada, yada. You also have something called Atlas. That is the thing that is responsible for determining which game servers are authoritative for which entities. And by authoritative, I mean like which game servers are making the decisions and running the calculations for you, the player, or this ship over here, or whatever, because you can only have one game server running the calculations at a time. You don't want to be in a situation where two game servers are running calculations for the same thing, because now you got all kinds of crazy shit going on. So,
yeah, I think I've seen that in Star Citizen.
you probably have. And so that's Atlas's job. And so all of these things that we're talking about are all currently running on a single server. Like, they're all in the same process. Or like, so like whatever CPUs that process is running on, like, those CPUs are sharing the responsibility for all of these tasks. And so when I mentioned splitting apart the hybrid, what I mean is CIG's intent is to split all of those things we just talked about into separate processes running on their own hardware with their own CPUs. So like, you have a set of CPUs that are dedicated only to the replicant, or to the game server, or to whatever. And once you have done that, then whatever process is sitting up here governing the dynamic server mesh is able to control each of those things at a more fine-grained level. So it can, if it needs to ramp up the entity graph or the replicant layer, it can ramp that up. If it needs to ramp up the game server layer, it can ramp that up. Like, right now, you don't have that fine-grained control. It's just like, well, I'm going to add a hybrid, and that includes everything. If that makes sense.
I see. It sounds kind of a little bit similar to what they're doing offloading work from the CPU in terms of rendering the game.
Yeah. Very
Just
close
freeing up more
conceptually. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, dynamic meshing. I hope we hear something about it during the 4.1 cycle of updates.
I do too. I do think that. I mean, I'm hopeful that we like. I guess my hope, and what I would be thrilled to see, is that like by the end of this year, there's a plan for starting to test on, like, like they said they were going to start doing like more like sharding of the verse into like these test branches that you could log into and play. I would love to see like
Yeah.
a dynamic server mesh version of that, like the end of this year, early next year. That would be amazing. But I don't know if
Yeah, definitely. I really like, if we don't see anything about dynamic server meshing this year, outside of just like a text update on it, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. I mean, I at least want to know there's some kind of movement there, because it's not the next Jesus tech, everybody. It's not going to fix everything, but it's just the next step, and the next step is always important to shoot for. Like, I love that we're getting to play in a server mesh Star Citizen, and it's running better and all that stuff, but next steps, you know?
yeah. And again, like the next step might be just that the hybrid is broken apart. So if we at least get that towards the middle of end this year, I think that would be like a good sign that we're about to get the dynamic version of server mesh.
Yeah, that'd be cool. All right, let's talk about the game's database. This is somewhere that I think we're not being told everything.
Mm-hmm.
They got PES in with 318. It caused a lot of trouble at first. They mainly got it leveled out, but I don't think the game ever performed the same after that. And I don't think they ever really got back to the same persistence that they wanted when they first released that. Towards the end of that year, Chris gave an update, I believe, saying that the solution they had wasn't working and that they needed to do some other stuff updating the database. But I don't know if we ever got an update on that. They just kind of did something with it and then didn't let us know. But there also seems to be just less persistence in general throughout the game right now. There's a lot more item cleanup. Things maybe don't last as long. What's your take from this? Do you feel like the whole persistence thing might be falling apart? Are they just maybe lessening things to focus on stability right now?
Good questions. And everything I'm about to say is guess. Like I would, like, ever since I've heard of Pez, my assumption is that this is just a lever that they want to have control over. And I think as a community, we expected, like, when we're hearing about Pez, we're like, oh, everything's going to be persistent all the time. And I don't know that that's a good idea or was ever CIG's
Chris
intent.
and his freaking coffee cup, man. I want to leave my coffee cup in the forest and pick it up. If I don't, I'm suing.
Yeah,
Screw
but
those
like,
sandworms, okay?
yeah. I mean, and I think that it is a noble goal, and I think it's going to take a lot of work to get back to that. But anyway, this goes back to the lever thing. Like, I expect them to want this capability so that they can employ it as it makes sense. Like, but some of the stuff that we've seen, like hangars getting junked up or landing pad, like, I go to like any moon, like it's a freaking dumpster fire down there. Like, I can't even find a place to land half the time. Like that does not improve player experiences at all. So like, in some ways, like, this comes back to the lever thing. Like, they need the ability to control what the persistence properties are in any given area or state of the game. And so just the fact that they have Pez, I think, is a big win. But it would not surprise me that they're like toning it back to deal with performance issues. And some of this goes back to the thing we were just discussing about, like the hybrid versus the split out. Like, because the persistent entity stream is going to put a lot of pressure on things like the entity graph and the communication between the entity graph and the game servers. And like, if you can't scale like the side of it that is dealing with or has the most burden in supporting this, then it's going to really limit like how much you can do with Pez, right? It could be that like they're like, hey, we need to dial this back until we split this apart so we can scale the entity graph up. It could be something like that.
Yeah. It's a tough reality, I think, of the development here. I'm willing to accept that not everything can persist all the time everywhere. It's probably, like you said, not going to be inducive to a good experience overall. But I'm also of the mindset that things that get thrown into the city and littered can offer easy contracts for newcomers in cities to like pick things up and put them in easy deposit boxes. It can teach you mechanics. It can show you the city. It can like give you a little bit of money, and it helps to clean up the server. I think they could do the same when it comes to giving towing contracts to SRVs, giving salvage contracts to salvagers. Like, I think there are game options for them to help to reduce items, but I also realize that's not as reliable as just writing a rule that says if an item's been here this long, we get rid of it and the game runs better. So I'm all about the persistent stuff, and I think I'd be more and more disappointed the way it's stripped away. But I also understand that sometimes you want, in certain parts of the game or in certain situations, you want to be able to control that. So I agree with that it's good that they have full control over that.
Yeah, I think I echo your sentiment. Like, I would love to see player-driven contracts. Like, hey, clean up this landing pad over here. Somebody crashed their jet into it. We need to get this out here. Like, I would love that.
Yeah.
And I think it could be both ways, right? Like, they could do like the whole like, hey, here's an 8-hour contract. If you don't accept it within this time, we're just going to automatically clean this up. Could be something
Exactly. Like an NPC went and took care of it, kind of
like that.
thing.
Yeah, exactly. But don't render the NPC.
Yeah.
We'll worry about
Don't worry
that.
about that.
2.0, we can worry about that.
All right. Performance. Is performance regressing in Star Citizen?
This kind of goes to the thing we talked about just a little bit ago, where I said we're going to get a roller coaster here. I do think that, like, I've seen performance regressing from the standpoint of, like, I feel like servers degrade faster with as player counts increase. Like, if you pull down that console and you're monitoring like how many players are actually on your server within your universe, like, it feels to me like things get jankier at lower player counts than they used to. But it's not surprising to me that that's the case. This goes back to like that roller coaster, and we're playing an unoptimized game and all that. So, but something to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, I do wonder. I mean, this goes back to the whole thing about, are they just going to keep adding servers because the player counts keep getting too high? I do also wonder about that. Like, the game always runs great when you get into a fresh server, but historically it degrades over time, and it definitely has more quickly. I think this is part of what triggers my anxieties about PES and their database. Is like, from what I'm seeing, most of the time when it looks like we're having problems, it's coming from assets that are laying around in the game world and the way that they're interacting with everything else, which always feels like database stuff to me.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I think there's definitely like performance issues around PES and entities and game servers. I don't know that they're going to be able to solve that before they break all that stuff apart. Maybe through optimization, but again, I don't think they're going to take that on yet either.
But ultimately, you are confident they can figure that kind of stuff out?
Definitely, yeah.
Cool.
There's no alarms going off in my head. I keep looking at their plan. I keep looking at the diagrams. I keep looking at the progress being made, and if I can offer any assurance at all, like, I feel like things are progressing as I would expect them to be. The things I worry about are the things I don't understand. And I think that's true for most people. Like, whenever you look at something and you don't really understand it, it's easy to get like nervous, like, oh man, this is never going to work. Like it's kind of like me looking at a problem in my car, and I'm like, oh, my car's doomed because I don't know how my car works. But like, you take it on a mechanic, like, oh, this is easy. This is no problem.
Yeah.
I'm the same way with the games. Like, the things that worry me in Star Citizen are like things I don't understand, because I don't understand the client side stuff and like the GPU and the graphics side. And so one thing I always see, and I'm like, man, I hope they can get that right, is like players, like the physics. Like, when I watch another player run across a landing pad, they just, a lot of times to me, it just looks like they're gliding, or like the motion's just not good. It doesn't feel
There's
like
no weight behind it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like they're connecting to the environment. And I'm like, I hope they get that stuff fixed, but I have no idea how that works, and so I worry about it.
I always think that has to do with the servers. I think a lot of us assume it has to do with the servers, but you're also right. Like, it's not just servers, it's not just performance. A lot of it comes down to just better code, and code that maybe wasn't that important back when they first made the animations.
Yeah.
Hopefully they do fix that up, though. For for the sake of assurance and like giving people a little bit more of an understanding of where you're coming from, why do you feel comfortable talking about the server stuff, the networking stuff, as opposed to client side? What's your background in that?
Yeah, good question. I'm a like YouTube is a part-time thing for me. I still have a day job, and my day job is system architect. I've worked at like all the big tech companies, not all of them, but a lot of them, and so I work on systems of scale on a day-to-day basis. Not games. I'm not a game developer, but like the systems behind these games, like Star Citizen and other big MMOs, are no different really than the big systems behind applications that you rely on every day. Things like iCloud and Google Drive and Alexa and Spotify and Netflix, like these are the types of systems I actually have worked on. And the systems behind those things they share a lot in common with what's behind Star Citizen.
I remember when I was first starting to learn more about server meshing, I was mainly learning how popular it was in banking and financial situations as opposed to video games already.
Yep, definitely. Everybody, I mean, this whole meshing and sharding and horizontal scaling, I mean, almost every popular service today relies on this type of thing. Just very slightly differences in implementation and like how it's done, but a lot of
And
similarities.
what's important.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's wrap this show up with a little talk about Star Citizen's future as an MMO. The market is weird. I'm not an MMO player, but there's no end to the amount of videos that I've seen that are kind of just like critical opinion pieces about the state of MMOs and the different ones releasing and whether the idea of an MMO has died and how the 2000s were great. Star Citizen is a very unique project. I think it's one of the MMOs that attracts most people not from the MMO genre, myself included. And that gives it a bit of an edge. But do you think that it is still aimed in a place where it can stand out from the rest of the big MMOs, like your RuneScape, your Final Fantasy, your WoW, ESO, these kinds of MMOs? I know have specific ways of doing things that you probably are much, much, much better, more aware of than I am. Do you think Star Citizen can kind of break the mold and make a unique place for itself in the market that people will pay attention to?
Yeah, it's a great question. At the risk of sounding like I don't even know what the term is, like a fanboy or shill, or I don't know, but like I'm
A
there's
sycophant.
a little bit of a rant here, but like I'm not a space nerd or like a guy. Like I'm not in Star Citizen because of the genre or because of like the FPS gameplay or anything like that. Like we talked about earlier in the show, like I am an MMO player, like Die Hard. That's all I played, and I've spent most of my time in fantasy games, like it's like Sword and Sorcery, like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, Ultimate Online. Those are like the games I have played the most. The reason I am in Star Citizen has nothing to do with the things that probably draw most people in. It has
Mm.
everything to do with like the potential I see in the project. I I genuinely believe that like if the project is a success and CIG can overcome all the technical challenges, that is not like a guaranteed thing, right? Like that is a Herculean task. But if they are successful, like I genuinely believe that like Star Citizen could make WoW 2004 look like a minor event in gaming. I think that like it could be, it could even like define like a new class of like game. Like MMO might be selling it short to an extent. Like I think like what made WoW successful in 2004 in my opinion is like that it was it like it brought like a new platform to like it wasn't just about the game. It was about like the backdrop that it provided for people, like as people, right? Like you could come into the game and suddenly you had like this whole world you could interact with. You had like all this player like dynamic player driven events. People were having weddings and funerals and like they were planning like grand like PvP events, and it wasn't even about the raids and the dungeons. It was like all this.
It was like Second Life, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the fact that like Star Citizen is prioritizing that type of gameplay in addition to giving like this super high fidelity environment and just the sheer scope and expanse of like how much space there will be, like a lot of the problems that you see in MMOs today like kind of fade away with that reality. Like a good example is like if you go into Ashes of Creation now, like everybody's screaming about like the PvP mechanics in Ashes and like the ganking and the area control and like, but a lot of it has to do with like you're squishing together like a very competitive player base into like a small area and you're kind of forcing that on people and like there's no other way to play the game. But like one thing interesting about Star Citizen is like, yes, if you want that kind of gameplay, you can have it. Go to Pyro, you know, go to this moon. There's going to be like a lot of like concentrated PvP there, but like it's also offering enough space that like players can kind of go off and find their own little hidden corner in the universe and play the way they want to play. And I'm kind of rambling at this point, but
well, as somebody who Star Citizen is the only MMO I've played, I don't have the perspective to understand how significant that is. Do other MMOs not focus on creating a lot of space for players to go and make their own areas?
Not really. I think it's a technical challenge, right? Like it's the whole reason
Making
for
your world big enough.
Yeah, it's the whole reason for dynamic server meshing. Like the reason like they can't do what Ashes of Creation come out and they're like, hey, we're going to create this big map, and it's one of the biggest maps I've ever seen in a sword and sorcery MMO. But the way they're going to do it is they're going to grid it up, and they're going to have a server assigned to each region, and blah blah blah. You know, simple. Like Star Citizen couldn't do that because like the space that they want to provide people to operate in is so vast that you literally could not grid it up and serve it that way. They had to come out with a new technology. And so yeah, I think the amount of space they're offering people is a byproduct of like what they're doing on the innovation front. And so yeah, very unique.
Interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't think that it would be different. I thought it would just be the same problems at a different scale.
Yeah. Very different.
When you say that you love MMOs, I get the idea that it's like a specific kind of loop or way of playing the game or kind of thing that happens. I know some MMOs are very focused on having you run like a narrative storyline. Some do more of random quests here and there. Does Star Citizen come off to you different in any way in that regard, or is it going kind of by the book?
The thing I love about MMOs is the people. So, I mean, that's what I can't get from a single player or even like a multiplayer game, right? It's just all the challenges that come along with taking a large group of people and organizing them and executing on objectives together and facing challenges and overcoming them as a group. And so, from that perspective, I think that so far, like Star Citizen offers a much more challenging uh, environment for that. Like, just for example, like you go into like World of Warcraft and you conduct a raid, right? You have like a raid leader and you all group up at the entrance and the raid leader starts issuing orders and everybody follows them and you slowly progress through the raid and you get the treasure at the end. Like, that's not Star Citizen. Star Citizen is like, you look at something like Halthor and you're like, okay, we have 23 objectives on the ground and 7 in space, and you're gonna have to break up into squads and like there's no way you could have one person just issuing orders, right? And have all these people following.
Yeah.
You need all this crosstalk. So like the challenges are far greater than what they are in traditional MMOs, as far as in my experience so far.
It's kind of mixing some of the more, I don't even want to say milsim, but more process-based games. Because you could look at something like Hard Space Shipbreaker as being more along the lines of where they want salvage to go, as opposed to just like a very simple thing to do. Like if there's a big ship you find for salvage, you need a team of people to figure out how to dismantle it, as opposed to just going in and everybody pressing buttons and getting rid of it quickly.
Exactly.
Kind of the same way it works in terms of combat.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a big step forward because I think one of the problems, like other MMOs have is like a lot of these loops. You were asking me if there's like a loop, but a lot of these loops, like they become more boring over time. Like I've said this a few times. Like you think about like just something simple like mining, right? Like in a game like World of Warcraft or New World or any of these types of games, it's like you go out and you right click and your player hits it and hey, something appears in your inventory. Like in the beginning, everybody's all excited, like, oh, I'm gonna go out to this and I'm gonna craft this and blah blah. But you know, a month, 2 months into the game, it's like, do I really have to go out and right click a bunch of rocks again? But like in Star Citizen, like the act of mining is like this big social activity, and like I can't see that really getting old for people, like in the same way that it does in these other MMOs.
Will be interesting to see. And when it does get old for people, how they facilitate your ability to just ask somebody else to do it and quickly get those goods back from them.
I keep thinking about like
Yeah,
EVO
that's
Online, right? Like EVO Online's been going for 20 some years, and
Mhm.
I can't even tell you the number of people I've talked to that are like, "What'd you do in EVO Online?" "Oh, I mined for 10 years. I loved every minute of it." like something to it. But again, like Eve was one of those few games that took the act of like resource gathering and resource collection and they turned it into like a social activity rather than a solo activity.
Yeah, so it can be done.
Yeah.
It can be. All right, Grolo. Hey, this was a good talk about server meshing. I hope this got people up to date on kind of what's going on it, what the expectations are, what we're kind of gnashing our teeth about, hoping to hear, and what somebody with a little more knowledge about the topic can tell you than myself. If you could let people know, though, where they can go to find more information about this and what kind of content you're putting on there, please let them know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Space Mail. This is always amazing to come on this show and chit chat. You can find me on pretty much just YouTube. I don't do anything else. You can go to YouTube / @Grolo-AF. And
I always forget that's your. I should put that on the name here in the podcast.
it's just kind of stuck now. Like people know it. So,
Right,
but
it's
yeah,
just,
if there you go.
There you go.
No, that's where you'll find me on YouTube. But I think if you just search on YouTube for Grolo, you'll find me. But yeah, the content over there is mostly about MMOs and more focused on the technical side. We do some other stuff too. It's kind of all over the place, just kind of whatever. But that's the theme.
You should just put in your description MMO AF. Just covering MMOs here. All right, man. Thank you again so much for joining me and for giving us some good information and knowledge to talk about here. And thank you, everybody, for listening in. Enjoy seeing you and hearing from you every week. We love your comments over on Spotify, here on YouTube, wherever it might be. If you don't like the YouTube ads, consider checking it out on Spotify. We actually do the video over there as well now. So if you want to have this podcast up when you're working in your car, I know some of you are, you can throw it up on whatever your favorite audio platform is. But thanks again for coming, supporters. I see you here live in the chat. Thank you for being here. And with that being said, everybody, I will catch you all next week.